In a previous movie, we showed a client who was new to gCADPlus how to use model space and lay out a concept drawing for a fire pit and some other development of a rear garden. We then showed how to put that information on a layout sheet. I want to return now to the model, and let's assume that the client has agreed to the concept. So what we now want to do is to put some names to symbols, some botanical names, and also to build a plant schedule. You may notice if I zoom in here and select that symbol and look down in the properties box, it's a symbol that's now been tagged to Banksia spinulosus, the hairpit Banksia, and it's to go in this position in the garden bed area. That's been tagged, or that symbol's been tagged by selecting a new symbol. Let's imagine that in this shaded area under some existing passion fruit, which I presume are on some sort of lattice work, it's quite hard for species to grow in this area, so we want a really tough plant that we know stands every chance of growing in that area. When we think a goodenia or a prostrate form of goodenia might work. So we go to gCADPlus and come to the edit a plant list. We attach a list and we edit it. So here's a list that's called Mid-Coast GCP. That's actually just a text file, and it contains quite a number of a list of a number of species. So we would like to use a goodenia and want to find the prostrate form of it. And here we are, there's Goodenia ovata, but also Goodenia ovata prostrata. There's a double entry in here, so I can deal with that now, I think. I'm not sure. Let's select it and we'll delete that record. And we're here, but what we want to do is nominate that symbol is the prostate hop goodenia, so we just say OK. Now when we select it, and again look down through here, so that didn't work because I was busy editing the information as well as tagging it. So let's try again. So we say set species data to this symbol. Jump back in here now, goodenia, and search, and here's the one we're after, and we OK it. Now when we select it, can you see down in here, it's now tagged. So in fact, all of these symbols here in this simple little concept plan now to be implemented. There's Banksia again, and this one is a Baronia, and there's another Baronia in there. And rather than count the number of each species, we'd like to use one of the tools in gCADPlus to create a plant schedule, and we'll do it over here. And we have a special tool for doing it. gCADPlus plant schedules. Come down here. We can do a simple schedule, which we will do first, but also schedules with custom content. So we can say, I'll just use, let's assume we're going from scratch. So we would draw it, and down in the command area, we're going to have 75 units. We'll input a corner point. We expect to see at least one more in this list. So we'll come down to much the same area, cramp it up just a little. Whoops, what I've done is not read my prompts. 75 is correct. Corner point here, next point there, and now we've drawn it. And notice now that goodenia, and there are 5 of them. So now we have a plant schedule. Notice that it's well separated from the drawing. It's still in model space, but we want to present that information. So we can go to the layout space. There's probably space here in the top right. So let's double click it and go into that preview of what we're going to get. We'll just move things across, expand it just a little, Come back again. I'm just trying to leave some space up here, and now we'll display it on the layout. You can either, the best way to remove that dotted line is just to double click inside, and remember that's a floating viewport now with a white background, and we have some space here. So if we come down to layout 2, and by the way, you could rename that, just call it landscape plan, but we can add another viewport. I'm in the habit of just drawing my area. That's going to be the floating viewport. Double click it, and the one we're after. So can you see that viewports, you can look at any part of the design, the model space design, in this way. And now present that, display it in the layout like so. Whoops. And again, I'll make that as we did before. We'll give it color 255. And now we'll move it. I'm using right click and move. And pop it over here. Now zoom extents. We just look for the balance of the thing. So if I zoom in on it, it's going to look reasonable. We can again do a little test PDF, generate a PDF. Do what we did in the previous movie and just make a new PDF so we can send it to the client. And it's going to go to mid-coast jobs 2024 and fire pit. We made it. We'll call this one test 2. And we'll save it. I hope we get a preview now. We just want to check that this area looks fine. One opens, so we can just zoom in. And I'm relatively happy with that, although there's some little bit of crowding in there. So if we made the floating viewport larger, it would look a little nicer. So I'll close all tabs, in fact. Come in here to select the floating viewport. We should be able to grab it like so, and we can. What we want is for that to be larger. And to adjust the view inside that floating viewport, just double click it, and by reducing the size of the preview box and display it on the layout, I hope you can see that the plant schedule looks a little larger. We can move it to the left and adjust things, but that looks nice in terms of its size and so on. If we come back here to the model, this is actually just a block. So we can hop in there if we want and edit it. We could change the height of that if we wanted to increase the height. We can make it 75 to match the other text height and so on. So we can do any amount of editing. Of course, we don't edit the numbers because if we now go back, close the block editor, and just remember we're in model space, we come back in here and we must have some spare space somewhere where we could, let's imagine we had 5 goodenias, so we could copy that over there and pop a couple in that corner. And now we can go back over to the plant schedule, and the goodenias, there are 5 of them, but we've added 2 more. So we can update the plant schedule. So now we have 7 in there. So I hope that completes, if you like, the next stage in this developing a very simple drawing. We've now got something quite useful. We can implement the design. We previously showed in gCADPlus that you can generate a plant schedule very easily by using a tool on the gCADPlus drop-down menu, and it had a number of variations, but we just drew the standard schedule, which drew its information from a plant database file, and that's a simple text file, and you see it here with a number of entries in the botanical name, common name, type, code, and so on it goes. You can hold a lot of information in this particular file. Let's close it for the moment, and you may remember that we generated the plant schedule well away from the design proper. If we go then into layout, we were able to present both the design and the plant schedule on the same sheet. And we did that by creating a new floating viewport. And here it is here. It has a white border on a white background, and there it is. We can position that anywhere we want in the design, in the display area. So let's zoom extents. I'll now return to the model, and let's imagine that the client likes this, but essentially the plant schedule is for the implementation of the project, and he wants to get a better idea of the sort of species that are going to be used, and he certainly wants to do some naming. Well, there's another tool in the gCADPlus drop menu which is called Smart Plant Label, and if I turn on that layer, it automatically creates that layer when it's working. And you may be able to see now that most of the plants are labelled. I've only labelled this symbol here, Banksia spinulosa. There's only one label through here. There are ways to label all of those in the group, but it's not a difficult job to do. This ground cover species through here is a prostrate goodenia, and it's not yet labelled. So to label it with that Smart Label tool, remember we're doing that in addition to the plant schedule. We just start it. It uses a command called Smart Label, and again, as usual, down here in the command area, we're given the prompt. So we select the symbol or adjacent copies. We just pick the one, and we hit enter, and we're asked, do we want a line or a leader? Well, we'll leave it at leader, and the first point of the line identifying it can be here, and we just move away at an angle. To keep things neat and tidy, it's often useful to put it in at a 45-degree angle, and I'll do that. And we're asked a number of questions. Do we want to pick up the code? Well, no, we don't. Do we want the botanical name? Yes, we do. We don't need the common name. That's going to clutter up the drawing a lot, but we could. Do we want to count the number? Well, not in this case. And you notice now that goodenia has gone in. It looks a bit cluttered because it's overlapping the symbol a little bit, but you can use the usual gCADPlus commands, and we'll see if we can pop it in, and it now still goes at the same angle but doesn't clutter and overlap. It's not good to overlap these lines. This one we might want to bring it to the front. It might be hiding, so you can bring it to the front. Now it goes over the top of an underlying thing, and you can, the fact that it's a leader means you can adjust and move things around very nicely indeed. So you can do things like, and I've used it over here for the Hardenbergia, which is going to fill that area, and we can do all sorts of interesting things by clicking on it, and we can edit it. So we can put the cultivated variety name, and do that, and now the label looks a lot neater. We can right justify that or left justify it. So let's right justify, and that is nicely positioned. So that tool we think can be very useful. Now you could print a copy of this from the layout space, and your client gets all the information they need. You can see I have to move things around in this area here and down there, so I might need to dive in here and either move those bits of text around or increase this, so that what that of course is doing is changing the magnification factor for that floating viewport. And you can see by doing that, can you see how we've crowded in here? So how do we deal with that? Well, we might move this into a different place. Maybe there's room for it down here, nearly room there. Now the scale bar gets in the way, so we could jump back into the model and just move the scale bar and the north point indicator up. And hopefully when we return to the layout space, things look pretty good. So lots of things to play with, lots of controls in the gCADPlus environment. There are lots and lots of tools for you to play with.